Hola, ¿qué tal amigos? Una vez más aquí, bienvenidos a Zoom 33, Ascensión a la Quinta Dimensión. Y en el día de hoy tenemos una invitada más que especial. Hoy empezamos una etapa nueva en Zoom 33, Ascensión a la Quinta Dimensión. De nuevo, su servidora Marcela Gómez Bogomolny, invitando a Lisa Nelson. Esta entrevista es en inglés. Es una entrevista muy relevante porque Lisa es una persona que, pues ella ha sido contactada y ha tenido contacto con UAPs, o sea, todo lo que conocemos como personas extraterrestres o fuera del planeta desde que ella tenía 15 años. Hemos decidido entrevistar a Lisa y es en inglés porque Lisa pues es una de las miles de personas que seguramente han tenido este tipo de experiencias. Ella escribió un libro, este libro se llama Los Visitantes, Secretos de la Tierra, está en inglés. Vamos a tener la oportunidad de que tú a través de YouTube, tú entras en Settings, miras ahí y tocas y cambias el lenguaje de inglés a español y vas a ver todos los subtítulos en español, pero la entrevista va a ser hecha en inglés. Lisa Nelson es una compañera que tuve el placer de conocer en mi universidad y ella lanzó su libro hace poco, es a nivel mundial, ha sido entrevistada y trabajado con varios ufólogos con referencia a lo que tiene que ver con vamos a llamarla, investigaciones que hacen desde hace muchísimo tiempo. ¿Por qué lo ponemos ahora? Porque es más que relevante a nivel mundial. El Congreso de los Estados Unidos está aceptando escuchar por fin a personas que tienen mucho que decir con referencia a este tipo de contactos. Y no más esta semana pasada tuvimos en el Congreso de los Estados Unidos personas de pilotos importantes hablando de sus testimonios, y estos testimonios han sido tomados en serio, puesto que se ha tratado de cubrir esta información por mucho tiempo. Y bueno, hoy le vamos a dar bienvenida a Lisa, porque pues Lisa ha tenido el placer, nos ha dado el privilegio de tener esta entrevista. Sin más hablar, vamos a darle bienvenida a Lisa. Hey, Lisa!
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me, Martha.
I feel so not only proud, but happy to have you. And let's begin with how we met. Lisa and me, we have this love for healing and this love for intuition and spirituality. We both go to the Barbara Brennan School, and there is where we met. So Lisa, I already gave an introduction in Spanish to people. And today, I just first of all want to thank you for your time, for your trust. And well, lately in the United States Congress, there has been a hearing and places for people, different country representatives have come in front of the Congress, explaining to them that they have opened these places for ufology and these investigations. They're giving credit to these visitors into Earth. But however, the United States has not really been that open regarding that. But now it has come to the attention of Congress that maybe yes, it is true. It is true that we have visitors that are not from Earth in Earth. And it seems like Lisa Nelson has been one of those human beings that have been experiencing these contacts since a very young age. Is that correct, Lisa?
That is correct. It would have been a period of continuous contact starting around when I was 15 years old until I was about 30 years old. And when I was wrapping that up, spiritual contact became much stronger. So I became much more interested in the divine and angelic beings. So that's where my contact continues to this day, is the beings of love and divinity.
One of my purpose for this interview, and I just want to clarify out there that I invited Lisa to be interviewed because I've been guided to. I've been reading her book, This book is published and is being published. You can find it in Amazon. I've been reading her book, and I was going to interview her when the book was finished. But then I've been guided to do this interview now because it's relevant, because now is the time where people is actually opening their ears and their eyes to kind of understand, or even given some kind of thought, or even some kind of possibility in their minds. So this is the time, Lisa, for us to express what happened to you. And during this book, Lisa mentioned her life. And when you were 15, let's talk a little bit about what happened, Lisa. So you were 15 and you had, oh no, before this, Lisa, where are you from?
I'm originally from the Midwest in northern Illinois, not real far from the Chicago area. Grew up in a very nice area. At the time, it turns out, that area was one of the most anomalous regions of the country for UFO sightings. And maps would show that it was a very active time, and it correlates exactly with the period of time that I was having a lot of contact. I myself, being a youngster or a middle schooler, had read an important book written by Erich von Däniken entitled I got nervous and forgot the title. Chariots of the Gods.
Breathe. It's okay, no problem. Just let's breathe both together. I'm almost nervous because I don't know much about this, and I wish I could know more so I can make more interesting questions. I'm just going to be a curious admirer, let's put it that way, from this topic, and I'm just going to make questions. So just feel free.
Okay, thank you.
It's just a conversation. It's fine.
So I had read Chariots of the Gods in middle school and was burning with curiosity and desire to know if UFOs were real. I also developed a crush on the new kid in town whose name was Rob, and he was very blonde, tall, blue-eyed. He looked different from most people and exceptionally intelligent with a really interesting personality, athletic skills. And being a wallflower sort myself, I never thought that he would notice me, but in high school he did. And soon after we began dating, when I was in the butterflies and fluttering heart phase of the romance, he began to tell me that things were not as they appeared.
Wait a minute. So you are 15, you are in high school. This is through Illinois, by Illinois?
Illinois.
Yeah. And then you see this cute guy. He's tall, blue eyes, blonde.
He's new. He's
new in
From
town.
out of town. He's new in town. He's not
Did he have parents? Did he have parents?
Yes. I'm very close with one brother. We now call each other brother and sister, although he was my brother-in-law. But Rob passed away quite young, and I believe due to exposure. And
wait. We are in this is the new kid. We started dating, and then he said, it's another way they look. And how do they look, and how actually they were? What happened there?
He looked different from everyone in his family. They all teased him that he wasn't really part of the family, that they always said he was adopted. His physical description looked actually a little more the way people nowadays describe Pleiadians, but I can't make that exact correlation.
That's what I actually, the name that came into my mind, and he's from Pleiades. I don't know how to say it in English well, but Pleiadians.
Pleiadians. And we had been dating for a little while, and one day he very seriously took me for a walk and said, something happened, and I have to tell you what happened. And he said that he had been contacted and that some beings from a craft wanted to meet with him. And he told me that he was scared. And I asked him, well, how did they contact you? And he said, on the telephone. Now that seems strange. Like they use the phone, but how would they do it? So that night, he asked me to pray for him. I watched out the window. I didn't see any UFOs in the sky, but the next day he came back and said, well, these are the ones who took my real parents, and claimed to me that he had been adopted by his family. Some of this is not exactly accurate, and I think it was in the context of introducing me to ideas to see if I could handle them and go forward. And for a while, I was suspicious that he was playing a trick on me. It wasn't long before I started seeing things that human beings cannot do. And that's when I began to weigh things out, like, this is a crazy sounding story that he's interacting with aliens and going on a ship, but something just happened that human beings can't do. What do I do with that? So I was in dilemma for quite a few years, where I was watching and saying, I'm suspicious, but
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
So you stay there, now you're talking about years.
I'm talking about years. Years out of the 15 years, there was, I need proof. I need to see things. And it actually wasn't long before I was in bed one night. It was within a year. I could go into tremendous detail, but I'll jump ahead a little bit. There was one night where I was asleep in my bed. I was still in high school. This was maybe not long into our relationship. I heard helicopters approaching my neighborhood from a great distance from the south, heading toward the major airport, which would have been O'Hare Airport. And the roaring of these approaching helicopters kind of woke me up, and I was aware I'm asleep but awake. What are these helicopters doing here? And they came directly over the neighborhood, and two of them stopped directly over my yard and stayed stationary, and tremendous lights were flooding into my window. And this woke me up. I seemed to be in something that was like a hypnotic state, and I got out of the bed and walked to the front door. The lights were still streaming into the door through the little windows. I walked onto the front yard, and I'm now looking at the bottom of a giant craft. It was so big that it was about the size of a football field, hovering silently. As soon as I came out on the front yard, the two helicopters left and left me looking at the bottom of a craft, humming very, very softly. And it was as if I was looking at a ceiling. It was so low. And then suddenly I was on the inside of the craft.
Wait right there. Okay, Lisa. So what you're telling me is, how old were you already? 15 still?
I was probably 16 by then.
Okay, so you were basically adopted. I mean, you were taken.
I was lifted up.
Yeah. No noise? Nobody heard it? Your parents? Were you with
Nobody
them?
woke up. There was another instance of helicopters coming to the neighborhood, and a neighbor was looking out the window, shading her eyes to see out the window. So I know that it was something that other people could see.
So you were able to see it, but nobody else was?
Well, there are situations where with beings, they can make people freeze, or they can make them not notice. In this situation, nobody in my family woke up. I woke up and walked to the living room and then out to the front yard, and I'm looking at this craft, and then all of a sudden, instantaneously, I'm now on the inside of it, looking down through a transparent panel on the side of the craft. I'm kneeling on it, actually in a crawling position, looking at the roof of my house. So I now know I'm up in the air, and then a very tall being said, "Turn around." And the panel, which had been clear, now became metallic.
Okay. At this point, are you afraid? Are you screamed? Or you already been prepared by Rob for all this year of this time? No?
At the time, I had been demanding proof, and I had been demanding to be taken on a ship so that I could know that everything he was telling me about his interactions with the aliens was true, because it was very hard to take, especially from a youngster. You know,
For everybody, Lisa.
we're high school kids. You know, people tell stories, they play jokes, and it was a lot to take in. Now I'm on a craft, and I'm very calm. And I do note that quite a few people who have interactions with beings are unusually calm. And it seems to me they have an ability to keep people peaceful and to have a calm interaction, because a lot of people would be pretty upset. They'd be scrambling probably. And
so what happened? This being, you said large being, like somebody
tall thin being. And I noticed, although they were trying to be invisible, they were not invisible. They were very short beings in what looked like little brown monk robes, and looked like what people now describe as grays. I had never heard that term until many years later. They didn't have hair. They had large almond eyes and narrow chins and stick-like arms, and were hiding behind the tall one, and I could see them. They never did interact with me, but the tall one had a telepathic interaction with me, where I was asked a question to my mind, and I said I wanted telepathically back to them, let me give the answer, and they searched my mind as if my mind was one of those old-fashioned Rolodexes where you had note cards that you would flip. Secretaries had them on their desk at the time. That's how my mind felt. It was flipping through all the files of my mind, and I noticed them getting some information, and I was kind of struggling, like, hey, don't go in my head like that.
So you were basically feeling.
I was feeling the rifling through all of the files, so to speak, of my mind and getting some information. And then there was a moment where they say, come over to this table. The table was like a tabletop, which materialized and was floating in the air. It did not have legs. I was shown hieroglyphic symbols which rose up out of the surface of the table and were either ruby red or cobalt blue, and everyone looked like a hieroglyph. And I was asked to look at each one of them. And as I viewed each one, I knew what each one meant, and I was asked to indicate which one was mine. And I looked at each one, and each one told me what it meant, and there were probably 30 of them, and there was one that I saw and said, that one's me. And there was a sort of an approval, like, very good. And then it streamed a laser into my eye with so many images that it was countless. And they were images that I could see. It was as if I was seeing everything that I had ever stored in my memories, and then some codes, other visuals that I didn't know what they meant, but it was all mixed in with memories, such as what I had gotten for Easter as a 3-year-old, dreams I had had about horses when I was a little girl, very special moments, all kinds of information was streamed into my pupil. And I said, boy, I hope I can remember all this. And I do remember slight amounts of it, but I do know that I was getting an intense amount of information in that moment.
So when he got in, you got in, he told you to turn out, they did this into your head, and they took all these memories and kind of put it in something.
I don't know what they did with the information. They may have read it, because I did visit a counselor who is a spiritual intuitive, and he said nothing was missing. And I don't know that I've ever been made to forget anything, although when we had a UFO sighting a few years later that my entire neighborhood saw, several of the people who were there for that sighting cannot remember what it looked like. And that's why it's on the book cover. It was to let them know what it looked like. That rectangle in the sky was a UFO that appeared in my neighborhood one crystal clear summer night. It was probably July or August, and there were at least probably 8-10 people who watched it for quite a while. And it was giant. The rectangle itself looked to me like it was about the size of a World Trade Center tower with no doors and no windows. And it sat there in the sky for quite a long time. There's an interview in the book about a friend who is able to recall it and described her experiencing seeing it. And then I talk about some of the other people from the neighborhood who recall very distinctly that we were looking at something in the sky. We were all gathered together, and we were pointing and looking at it for quite a while. And if I were to ask them what did it look like, they would say, I can't remember. So it seems to me that there may have been some forgetting that was induced by the beings who didn't want it to be reported, is my thought on that, because there was debate going on at the time about what we should do about it. And some people said, call the police. Some people said, call the newspapers. Some people said, let's call the news. And it may be that the ones who wanted to call the news are maybe the ones who are not recalling. There are many, many situations of people being calmed or not able to raise their camera to take a picture, even if they have a camera in their hands, or to be given this sort of message that says, this isn't important, you don't need to be upset or worry about that, just forget it.
Lisa, going back to your encounter with them, so they basically told you which is yours. They were your memories of different aspects of your life, usually good ones, I'd see.
There was quite a bit of information that was too high level for me to know what it was. I will add that, because some of it I wanted to remember just to hopefully find out what it was. And I do not to this day know what it was. Some of it looks symbolic or code-like, and I can't tell you what it would have contained, but it was mixed in with memories, that's for sure.
Now, what was the purpose of this encounter for you to accept that, yes, there exists, this is true? Did they tell you what happened after that?
I was never told the purpose of the encounter. It did let me know that what was going on between Rob and I was definitely otherworldly. And at the time, I was beginning to have contact with the beings that Rob was collaborating with, who were called the Guardians. And at the time, I was being introduced to this idea that the reason for these beings, and there are many kinds of beings in the earth realm, in the terrestrial realm, and they have different plans and different intentions, but the good news is, which I'll talk about later, is that according to the Guardians, they had a purpose for being present, and they were telling me how they were doing it, but the overarching purpose was to help unbalance the Cold War, which was very intense between the United States and the USSR, or Russia at the time. Mm-hmm. Because we were very imminently threatening one another, and we were being taught to be prepared for nuclear war, what to do when a nuclear bomb goes off. And everybody at the time was very afraid.
What year was this?
It was around 75, 76, 77, 78, and then the heavy technology development activities that they were describing to me were in the late 70s into the early 80s, into the even as far as specific aircraft, which I have looked into the timing of the statements that guardians were making with me and the actual advent of certain technologies, and having had contact with an engineer who was very familiar with those projects, and guidance led me to have contact with that engineer. So the guardians were saying, we are here to unbalance the Cold War. We are worried that you will blow yourselves up. You have technology that could be harmful to yourselves, so we're concerned about your behavior, your maturity not to use it. You're not evolved yet enough to be part of the neighborhood of planets yet, and we have to stay out of sight while you grow and evolve. But in the meantime, we are using telepathic means to download engineering advances to the United States to move it ahead of the USSR, Russia. And we are doing this.
Okay, continue.
Because you could really hurt yourselves with your nuclear weapons, but you could also harm other realms. And we have a duty not only to protect you from invasion, from outsiders, from your planet, but we're concerned about you guys not being mature enough. And we are taking measures to unbalance the Cold War by using telepathic means to advance your technologies. And that we are watching military installations, especially nuclear-oriented installations, for the purpose of knowing what you're doing. And we show up there, and it causes national emergencies, security emergencies, but we're keeping an eye on things. And there was no way at the time for me, a teenager, 15, 16, I was just learning to drive at this time. There was no way to know these things unless there was a small town in the area where UFOs had shown up at a military base, and it maybe got into a small newspaper, and there were small amounts of information. But later on, someone I met in my 20s when I was in college spent many years gathering interviews with 160 military personnel who were on duty at military bases. And this book was written, UFOs and Nukes. And this verifies that what I was being told in the 70s was actually very true. They were showing up at military bases and monitoring towards the end of keeping things peaceful.
And when you say they were showing up, meaning in aircraft, or they were humanoid ways, or how would they?
They were showing up as craft most of the time. And during these years, if a military personnel reported something, or there was a sighting that a lot of people see, either went under top secret standard, it was not to be discussed. And some of the people who reported were silenced or told that they could not discuss it with anyone. And some of those people were sent off to different places so that they were kind of sent away so that they could not proliferate this information.
I have to share my feelings at this moment when you're saying that, and then I start feeling this excitement, and even feeling a kind of even wanting to cry for some reason. And
I can understand.
Yeah, it's so like this feeling. Yeah, no, it's beautiful for me. I mean, let me explain why, Lisa. This channel has been open through guidance. I mean, my husband and me, we are Jewish by religion, and he's a rabbi and I'm a social worker, a clinician. So that's my 3D life. That's how I do it. And we have our jobs and all that. But then this channel has been developing little by little, trying to open people's mind and see and evolve in some way so they can open their heart and their mind to new levels of information. And some people has been rough in their comments, and how it is. When you mentioned that they are here to unbalance the Cold War, and in other channels that are in Spanish mostly, and also in English, they mention how these visitors not necessarily are always the bad guys, and they mostly, you mentioned in the moments that you were talking, there are two types of people, like always, the good ones and the non-good ones, and over there it seems like it's no different. And we have these people coming, and this is not the first time I've heard what you're saying. I just want to say that they were overseeing ourselves with the technology we have had, and that we have been downloaded into telepathically. This is not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it from my teacher, Choi Won, which was my teacher for a long time. And in his seminars, he would say that, or things like it, and other people. So we can also, based on what you're telling me, these people was here to protect us.
Correct. That's exactly what they were saying. They were telling me things that at the time were unverifiable, but now they are proven and known, not only through the writings of authors who were able to come forward through their research. For example, Robert Hastings, who wrote UFOs and Nukes, verifies that the Guardians were saying, we are watching your military bases. We are helping to protect you from incursion from beings who would take over your planet if they could. We protect you, but we are also looking at your level of maturity, which isn't there yet, so we have to stay out of sight. And then the actions of showing up at the military installations and this being kept a very big secret. Ostensibly, they have said that we don't want the public to know about it because there'll be widespread panic, which at the time may have been far more true than it is now. I think we've all seen so much material about UFOs in movies and in documentaries and television shows that we've all had a chance to think about it. Most of us have decided where we fall on the makes sense to me, or I still don't know, or no way. But the Foundation of Research for Extraterrestrial Encounters, whose research I participated in, and their data was loaned to me to use in the book to show how much the Guardians told me is actually now proven in research, is that there were many engineers who said in the research with free Foundation of Research for Extraterrestrial Encounters that they were the recipients of telepathic downloads for engineering or technology advancements. There were many people who were told that there is a protective agenda for us, that they are helping to evolve us. I was being told they were even interested in music. They were even interested in a more evolved society that we're hopefully on our way to reaching. But one of the important things is we really have to care about other beings. And I may be jumping in the gun, so tell me if you have more questions. But it seems to me, with all this recent disclosure and the backwash that will be happening with it, some of the questions that they were listing out was, are they our enemies? Could they do bad things to us? And it's all very concerned about, are these our enemies? And I would like to say, based on what the guardians were telling me during all these years of describing missions to me and advancements in technology that they were interested in. And some of the interviews that I have verifying that the guardians weren't just saying crazy things. They are proven now. We have a situation where we need to ask all the questions, not just the military questions. We need to ask the questions, what does this say about us as humanity? Are we really ready to interact? Because right now, from what I was seeing in the congressional hearings, seems to be, do we need to be ready to shoot them? And that has been the approach so far. Militaristic. It has been warlike, and they want to shoot them. That's the number one response.
Yeah, because unfortunately, the fear of knowing that they have a more advanced technology is always put us in the position of, do we have to defend ourselves? And not necessarily. I believe that the power and the advance of this technology is being already shown for years. And if they wanted to shoot us, they would have already done it.
I agree. They could have done it so long ago. We can't catch them in most cases. Now, there have been great strides in our technology, and I understand that there may be examples of technology obtained or collected. Even beings may have been collected for research and study and for the purpose of back engineering. One thing that the guardians were telling me was that they were leaving hints around, but they weren't going to come fully forward because society wasn't ready for it. The government tells us, oh, we can't tell you everything because we'll have mayhem. But the thing is, the war machine, it seems to me, wants to create an enemy of the beings, and I hope, to put forward the question, are they here to help us, which is part of the title of the book. We need to be asking that question. In what ways have we developed with hints, with downloads, with telepathy that is coming into humans on an individual basis because their openness allows them to be the recipients of higher thought? And from what I've been told, and if you read the book, you'll read quite a few mentions of areas where we are getting ideas from higher, more advanced beings. And even music in the day, if you recall in the 70s and early 80s, there was so much about other worlds being projected through music, especially through recording artists like David Bowie and Yes, for example.
They mentioned Queen, and in different of those groups, they downloaded music and messages for the world. I mean, it's well known that this is not only being downloaded for engineers, for music, for books, even your own book, and other people's books, and other people's artwork has been downloaded and has been given to us telepathically. Now, people would say that those are angels, or those are ascended masters, or that type of stuff. So, are they ascended masters, or are they
all of it? It's everything.
Huh?
We have advanced beings, we have guides, we have ancestors, we have angels, we have archangels, we have ascended masters. We have all these wonderful beings, and to think that the way the universe works is it's God and then us is missing quite a big span of the life and the dimensionality of creation. And I feel so privileged in some ways. I mean, some of the things that I write about were very traumatic, but there was tremendous amount of wonder to see what incredible technology that they had to be able to switch somebody or to take over their consciousness and channel another being into them so that they could walk around.
There. We haven't. We switched to the Guardians. We switched to the Guardians message, but now we're going to go back to the story. Okay, so you were at the craft, they so they put you down. What happened after that? You saw your memories, and then what happened?
I remember it very clearly. I have encountered many years later, because this is still in the 70s, about 1976. I have located other accounts of describing the interior of a craft nearly identically. Their use of illusion or fog to create partitions inside the craft, the way light emanates is not from a light bulb or from sunlight coming in a window. It just fills a room. It's almost like moonlight that just fills a room like air fills a room. So the other people have described the interior crafts the same way I described it. I was kind of blasé about that whole thing, and I think it must have been some sort of influence or mind suggestion to say you're not upset, because it's hard to think that somebody would go there, have such distinct recollections, and have such contact with very high advanced technology and beings who were much more advanced to be able to converse with me entirely telepathically and to read into my mind in the way that they did.
Which is, by the way, how we anticipate that in the fifth dimension, we are going to already communicate telepathically. And if I am honest, I developed that ability since probably 10 or 15 years ago. I developed it. I was able to listen to what people, and I am able to listen and feel what people have in their minds. And I think it's for everybody, something that we all little by little go into, and we are already developing it. And I believe it has to do with the level of consciousness. And the more transparent we are, the more clean we are as human beings, we get to be transparent. They actually say that in the future, life, there is no privacy, as we are now anyway going through.
Probably no secrets.
There we go. And so it's going to be to the point that no secrets at all, because people's going to have to be transparent. And that's how they say we're going to become crystal, which means I can see you clear and crystal, because you don't have nothing to hide and I don't have nothing to hide. So
I do see crystal structures in people's crowns sometimes. It's very beautiful. I look forward to those.
They were able to contact you. This encounter ends, and then what happens? You talk to Rob. What happens when you end that? I guess that was your confirmation that these people.
It was very clear to me
this thing was right.
It was very clear to me that Rob wasn't joking, although the mind still wants to deny it. Human beings want things to be regular and normal, and especially a teenager does. So I was beginning to give pushback against the missions that Rob was going on. I didn't like being left with the holograms that were designed to keep his place as a technological projection of him that didn't imitate him all that well.
Let me interrupt you right there. So let's see again. He will have to go on missions, and in order for him, so let's put people in context. When you're talking about holograms and things, we haven't explained to them what was that.
Let's do the three forms of technology that I described. The first one is holographic, meaning that Rob began to tell me that he needed to go up to the ship, or that they would lift him to the ship. He would instantaneously arrive at the ship, much the way probably when I was on the lawn in the middle of the night, suddenly at another location in the blink of an eye or less. He would instantaneously be replaced by a holographic projection that looked exactly like him, acted somewhat like him, and if you put your hand out, you would receive a sensory signal that you were touching something solid, feeling warmth, touching skin. They are able to use illusion, which is another way they could interact in the three-dimensional, by telling your senses or your perceptions, there's an airplane, not a UFO. They could fly through the skies near airports, tell air traffic control, this is a flight, not a UFO, because it was easy to tell the technology that. And they taught me how to tell the difference between a craft with an illusion on it and an actual airplane. That was something that they taught me on some of the evening walks that we took together in the neighborhood sometimes. So there was holographic replacement, meaning I would have to walk around with something that looked like him, but wasn't that good of an imitation of him. So when we would walk to school together, we could just, the holograph could just be kind of no personality, maybe give me updates about what Rob was doing or what the Guardians were doing or things that they wanted me to know.
Was it his same voice?
It was the same voice. It was the same appearance. It was like a carbon copy of Rob. But to someone who really knew him, you knew he wasn't there because it was
soul wasn't there.
Soul wasn't there, the essence wasn't there, and aspects of the personality were not there. The holograms could pull it off with friends in the hallway in the high school. But to me, it wasn't the same. A kiss, nah, wasn't him. The other interesting thing was there were different versions of the hologram. So the first one was very much robotic. The second one was better. And they continued to get better. And some of them had different issues with them or caused certain problems that caused them to get replaced. So over a number of years, the first hologram was called number 2, because Rob was the number 1 original. And that one didn't last long because it got me really upset. So he said, oh, we're going to give you a new version. Got a new one.
No, wait. Lisa, I'm sorry. We have to wait.
It's a lot.
Can you breathe?
Oh, we have to go back to the technology. Well, the holograms were technology. And there were iterations of them, like computer
Did you see
programs.
them? I mean, did they talk to you? Like how would they communicate with you?
Exactly the way as if Rob was there, but it wasn't as good of a version. It just looked exactly like him, talked like him, but couldn't pull off the complete convincing imitation of him.
Okay.
So that was the holograms. Then there was illusion, which meant that they could project to an observer that they were seeing something else than was really there. So an example of that would be a craft flying over the neighborhood. They could make a UFO look like an airplane to the observer. They would project, you're seeing an airplane, you're hearing an airplane. That was another means. And illusion could also be used with a being from the ship was sent down. They had to be sent down as Rob's appearance because he wasn't there at the time, and they couldn't take a person off the planet. There had to be something taking his place if he wasn't there. If they took him up to the ship, or they displaced him and wanted to send down another person or being, it had to look like Rob. So there were 2 women beings who came to pay a visit to me, and came exactly in the appearance of Rob.
Oh, so you did not see them as women?
I did not see them as women, although one gave me a picture of herself.
How she was? No, I have to ask that.
And the other one, I was shown a picture through a photograph that was a photo of an album cover. And they said that she was involved in music, but they couldn't just let her come down looking as herself. At some other time, they said, "This is Alona. She's a very famous musician on the ship, and she's going to pay you a visit." And it wasn't the most pleasant visit because there was a rivalry there.
There was a what?
A rivalry.
Between who and who?
Well, it was a situation where I was the girlfriend at the time, but she had apparently been the girlfriend and didn't therefore like me. And when she came, there was something of a struggle. It was not the best encounter. I'll say it that way.
Wait, so how old are you at this point?
About 17.
Let's open parentheses just to let people know that we are with Lisa Nelson. She has been in contact with what we call UFOs or UAP since she was 15. Her boyfriend Rob was the new kid in town, but he ended up being somebody contacted by the UAPs for a mission in Earth. She ended up being part of this plan without her knowing, at least when she consciousness, and then she was part of the plan. But this man ended up being your husband years later, correct? Let's not go that far yet. So this man ended up being your husband, and this being called Rob in Earth, he has his own identity over there in the ships out there. He had another name there.
Yes.
So this lady was the girlfriend of Rob or the boyfriend of, what's his name? Tim.
Tomar.
No. Tomar. So she was Tomar's girlfriend?
So in relation to the Guardians, the Earth Protectors, he was known as Tomar, and he was said to be a very old being who had more than one life on Earth, but was always made to look to have a normal life on Earth, but then also had a space or an astral life as well.
Okay, that's very good. Let's breathe again, people.
I still have to breathe from this too. When you say it, it's like, what? This happened. It happened.
That's because it's opening our consciousness. Lisa, really thank you, because I know this can sound really, really out of the space. I've been trying to prepare people in this channel so they can get into these deeper spaces. And your contribution to this is well accepted. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. I really love that your viewers are so open-minded and so open-hearted.
Yeah, because my viewers and the viewers of those that have been interviewed in our channel, they are already preparing for a long time, spiritually, and they have been in evolution all this time to listen to these type of stories and have a Lisa Nelson who was willing to tell them.
It gets, this is the easy part so far.
I know. We're warming up. So
we're warming up. Yeah. Oh boy. Hang on, going around the corners, they say.
So Lisa, okay. So we have these two women. They come looking like Rob, but they actually girls.
They were.
Do we know
women.
Where it was?
One was not the friendliest, and I was pretty unhappy about that encounter. Some of the beings who came to visit me were sexually curious. And so things happened that nowadays would be considered not okay. So I will say that there was some invasion that occurred.
So they touched you? They had intimacy with you?
Yes, there was that. The second woman who came, and they were wanting to try out being a man, because they were projected into Rob's body, and they're like, I got to try this. The
I don't blame
second
you.
one, the second one requested my permission, and she was very sisterly and motherly to me in some levels, and it was easier to uh, be with that person in that way. But
So you did have
there
sex with them.
there was some sexuality that occurred, and what I will say is what happens in more advanced societies is their feelings about sexuality are different than ours. And in our world that would not be okay. In more advanced beings, they are not as concerned with exclusivity. Relationships are different because, as you mentioned, when we're all transparent to one another, relationships are different. They're going to be honest relationships, and they're going to be very open relationships, because when beings speak to you as a collective and they say we, they're all connected. So connection is a different thing. So that means physicality is not available to them. So there is a tremendous curiosity about it. Tom Kenyon writes about it a little bit in the Arcturian anthology, which is
Canyon, which Cannon.
I'll show you his book. The Arcturian anthology, Tom Kenyon was taken to a craft. He is a psychotherapist, scientist, sound healer, author, musician, and he was taken to a craft and interacted with some advanced beings who also described themselves as the guardians of Earth. They didn't say it like it was their name, but they talk about Earth development, that we don't have the maturity yet for beings like that to be fully apparent to us. So right now it's consciousness that is the way that we have contact with them. Because we rise to a higher vibration and they exist at higher vibrations. And we can meet them in this way, much like channeling. But we are in the process of gaining momentum collectively as far as raising into the higher consciousness, the higher vibrations. And it will be more natural for them to reveal themselves to us, and we'll take it more for granted that, of course, these beings are here. We see them all the time. Like, just as healers, like in my training as a healer, I've been a healer for over 11 years. Raising your vibration to do healing work raises your consciousness, and it is very likely you're going to encounter divine beings, crossed over ancestors, ascended masters, guides. And much of the reason for us coming together today was guidance. And I was hearing yesterday from the guides, it's important to talk about, we need to ask the questions, aren't some of these beings helping us? Aren't they protecting us? It's not just, do we need to shoot them down? Are they the enemy, and do we need to have a much bigger military now? Our military is big enough. We need to actually scale it back and let love rise to the occasion, because we could advance so much more if we would let love preside in our society.
I trust I have been receiving and studying for a while, and I have told and I have received, and I believe that there is already a piece of enough people in the planet with enough level of consciousness to touch the reality we are in for a better one. And that's how this type of encounters start being more and more, because we are elevating the vibration on the earth. If we go into science, let's talk about the Schumann frequency. Schumann. Uh, the earth is vibration is high, is going higher and higher every time. The solar flashes are also already bringing us into processing our feelings faster, for us to be healed faster, in order for us to vibrate higher, so these beings can be closer to us, and these encounters could be even more of a peaceful ones. I do believe, Lisa, in that our level of consciousness in Earth is changing, and I would not be afraid, even if the United States of America wants to protect Earth, feeling that this is obviously they feel fear. It's normal to feel fear. Oh my God, this guy is larger than me, bigger than me, more technological than me. I can be hurt. Yeah, but you not necessarily. It's a possibility, of course, but not necessarily. And it's been proven that it hasn't been that way through research and through the years of them making this new slowing down the needs of certain parts of the world to conquer others or to destroy ourselves. God forbid.
There seems to be some positive directional growth, and then there are always other parties that are saying, "Oh, let's militarize space." The Space Force was formed for exactly that reason, to almost take possession of it, to control it. And that, I think, is unfortunate.
But it's not going to happen, Lisa. Space is too big. We're too little.
It's too big. I think it'll be the moon and Mars first. They'll to grab it. But I think that there is some we should be enheartened by the fact that there are more than one writer, not just myself, but many writers. We're all rising as a group saying there are beings protecting Earth. And they could also, hopefully, if somebody were of a mind to push the button of nuclear war, to dissuade them, or, as has been rumored in the ufological community, even shoot down missiles if need be. Now, I really hope that the presence is as strong as when it was a very real thing for me. There was a great ability that was witnessed by my neighborhood to bring a craft down low to the neighborhood and leave it sitting there in the sky for quite a while. And it was a remarkable event. And to make some of us forget what it looked like.
So you do remember?
Oh, I very clearly remember it. I have an interview from a neighbor who gave an interview as to how she saw and encountered it. And I also provide a database that goes into the collection of data on rectangle UFOs. Usually they're horizontal, but this is an artist rendering of what I call the 59th Street UFO. This was about the size of the World Trade Center tower, the original one. The sky was perfectly clear except for electric white light emanating from the back of it and then purple clouds surrounding it. So this is Rob. This photograph was taken by Robert Hastings in 1981 because I helped generate sound effects for his multi-screen slideshow, which he was going on the lecture circuit, which came years before he released his book.
So life passed, you guys grew up, and he would go from being on Earth to do missions in other places, and then he will come back. And then this became normal for you.
It became tiring.
A psychologist, a psychiatrist, did they ever,
Does it ever become normal?
Yes.
On some levels, it became normal, kind of like it's what we always talk about. What I wanted and what I got, I insisted that we go to college and forget about all this stuff and in favor of the relationship, because we were talking in high school about getting married. But we said we should get our college education first. And so we went to college, and for the most part, the guardians were out of the picture, except for very rare occasions. He would do music.
Also, they allow you to have some kind of normal life at some point.
There were periods alternating with normal life and then activity. And college was a great time of having a break from the missions, although what happened during that amount of time, during that period of time, was more talk about not as much missions, meaning protecting sort of planetary sovereignty missions for protecting other planets or ours, but it became more about the technology, developing designs and telepathically passing them to the military. So they were talking to me about a plane with forward swept wings, which I now know is the X-29. And I have talked to engineers who were very familiar with the development of the X-29. And it was always meant to be able to turn at very sharp to do very amazing turns, to fly at great speeds. But the maneuverability was a goal of that project. And at the time, Rob and the Guardians were saying, oh, they still don't have the wings right. But an engineer that I spoke to said, yeah, the stability of the plane was an issue. But the Guardians at the time were very, very interested in that and the stealth and talking about it years before certain developments were very widely known in the public realm.
Is there a reason why they wanted to do it? Why would they download, like this plane? Or because my was this technology for us to develop and for us to have better lives and easier lives and all that stuff. But then we become greedy in some way, or we just start using this technology in the wrong way. So it's kind of like they hoping for us to grow so they can give us more, and grow, they can give us more. So Rob was one of these that will do the telepathic messages to them, or how would that, what was happening there?
He was often said to be doing what they called calculations. And he would write and spend a great deal of time at the library looking at what the aeronautics magazines were reporting about the development of it. And there were times he was said to be helping with calculations relating to technology that the Guardians used that was being passed down. I don't believe that he himself was telepathically transmitting it. The Guardians said that they were telepathically transmitting it. According to my interviewee in the section of the book entitled Interview with Skunkworks and Space Program Engineer, he mentioned that he believed, based on some of the leaps in the advances of the engineering, meaning it wasn't going through the usual changes of plan, change of plan,
quantum leaps, like
it was transilient, meaning it was light years ahead of where it had been. He was of the belief that there had been telepathic downloads happening. Now, were we getting greedy? I think that there has been, in one sense, waiting for us to develop as a society, but also a peacekeeping. And I have seen correspondence shown to me in confidence, showing one person in the military writing to another saying, no wonder the extraterrestrials would choose the United States to be more advanced than our counterparts who suppress human rights, where the United States claims...
Lisa, wait. When you were saying that, the image went wrong. So would you mind repeat it? No wonder. So use a message or...
in confidence, I was shown a piece of correspondence that dated back decades, but there was some discourse between high-ranking people in the military who were under very classified clearance, writing, no wonder the extraterrestrials would pick the United States to supersede the military of other countries because of our championing human rights. And the better good rather than other countries which suppress humanity.
Can you believe that when you said it again, the system rocked again? The video stopped. You said it, and the image went like that again. I don't know.
Should I try again? One more time. Can you cut this out?
No, I don't want to cut it out. I want it to be the way it is.
Say that.
No, I don't want it to be perfect. I want it to be the way it is. Because it's okay. So no wonder
the extraterrestrials chose the United States to become more advanced technologically over countries which suppress humanity.
So that means that we're more advanced because...
If you were choosing who should be ahead in the Cold War, would you pick the country that suppresses, or would you protect would you advance the country that believes in
obviously
essential human rights?
Yes, of course. I get it.
So why would they? There are some principles endemic to American thought, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. Of course, we have those glitches, and there are challenges always, and we're not here to talk about that at all. Yeah, but the idea that America is for human rights, we'll leave it at that. And to say, would extraterrestrials be aware of it? I'm sure they would be. They're far more intelligent than we are. They can read thought. They could certainly read collective thoughts or thought bands. Collective consciousness, of course they could.
Very important that you mentioned something before during this interview when you said the Guardians told you guys are going to be like away from the neighborhood of planets. You know, and in another channel that in YouTube, there is this lady, her name is Andrea Barnabe. She claims to be a historian from the archives of the universe. And her mission is to teach from the Melchizedek school. Melchizedek, I don't know if you get it.
Melchizedek?
Melchizedek.
It's hard for anyone to say, but that's what I came up with. Melchizedek.
So what she was saying was exactly that Earth was kind of like in a down level with all the planets. But now after 2012, Earth has been kind of like starting to be included.
Spiraling upwards.
Yes, spiraling. Instead of being in the same place going back and forth, now it's spiraling up. And then now we are exactly changing. And that's why we are live. Let's say Earth has hope.
Earth has hope.
Let's say,
and so should we. We should have hope. Yes. We are so connected to so many levels of beings just through our holographic nature, where we're connected to the Creator. We're connected to the Ascended Masters, like Christ, Abraham, Buddha, so many. I mean, there's someone for everyone. The archangels, the guides, the angels, the beings, our ancestors, they're all guiding us. And the more we raise our vibration, if it's prayer, if it's meditation, if it's breathing,
the more we get to connect, the more we get to be guided. I'll tell you this much, my job right now, it's everything is guided, and it was guided just to create. The creation of it was guided. Absolutely everything we do, including this interview. So let's continue, Lisa. Question.
Okay.
So we were at college. I want to get to the point where Rob kind of, his body got in trouble, and then.
Okay. So after college, we married. The only contacts that I really had with the holograms or the guardians at that time, there was one visitor, I will call it the energy being, and it was another curiously sexual being. And that was quite an astonishing experience, I will say. So I only saw the hologram, which by that point they were all named number 10 because we got tired of giving them another number, like with software. They all get different numbers. We got through school, got married, moved to New York, and I started to launch into my career, and Rob began to get sick. Now, during the years, he was sometimes said to have issues that they had to correct, which was from exposure to radiation. He began to fall apart after he completely separated from the guardians and was having memory issues.
How come he completely separated from the guardians? How that happened?
I wanted it.
Oh,
yeah.
Of course.
I wanted a normal life. I wanted it to be him and me. I didn't like the coming and going. I didn't like the holograms. The guardians weren't that nice to me at times, and I described that in the book, where they're kind of talk to me like you're just a little puny human kind of thing, and I'm like, yeah, but this is love, and stop interfering. And I wanted a normal life. I wanted it in the worst way. And I was always saying, come, be a human, be a real.
And he loved you.
And a human love. Let's have it was about the love. It was really about, let's be, make it an earth thing. Why is it always, why do they have to be in this? And it was selfish on my part, but I think it was legitimate to say I couldn't have a normal life. I had to keep secrets. They told me many times, if you talk about this, you'll be taken away and you may not come back. And at the time, members of the military who spoke up, there's many careers were railroaded and they were transferred or they were silenced. I was told that I would be basically sent to an asylum or heavily medicated.
Told by whom?
Well, by people who would potentially misdiagnose me as being psychotic or full of hallucinations or schizophrenic, because at the time some of the definitions of mental illness were not that well defined, and medications were not that well developed either. And at the time, somebody who was doing like Rob was, where he was here and then it was someone else, that might have been labeled a Sybil situation. If you are familiar with the story of a person who had multiple personalities, that might have been branded a situation of multiple personalities. But the problem with that argument is when you have a whole neighborhood that sees a UFO for quite a while, or you have a person who has been on a ship and can describe it in the way that is so similar to other people's descriptions, it almost looks like a copy, only my book was originally written in 1994, and there were books that came out many years later saying the same thing. And I didn't actually release this book until 2023 because I was afraid, because I had been instilled with fear. If you talk, things will happen to you and your life will never be the same. And thinking about nuclear war all the time was wearing to me. And they were always talking about nuclear war. You're 15, 16, 17 years old. What are you supposed to be doing? You're supposed to be going to school, falling in love, figuring out who you are, figuring out what you're going to do with your life. And here I am worried about nuclear war and what the aliens are doing, and how can I keep myself so zipped up and so clammed up as to never reveal anything about what I'm thinking about or what I'm witnessing.
Did you ever share any of this with your parents?
Never.
Are they alive?
One is, and I will. She does not. I have not told her that I wrote a book.
And
she doesn't read. She's of an age where she doesn't read books anymore, and I believe that it would be very hard on her to realize that she had no idea what was happening to her daughter.
Absolutely.
And I think it would be almost as bad as, say, the parents of a mass murderer. If you think, how did we not know this was coming? Or how did this stuff happen to her? Because things happened to me that were traumatizing at times, especially things we may talk about going forward, which I haven't mentioned yet. But this had to do with when Rob was falling apart. His health became very poor. He wasn't holding a job. I was working and struggling to pay the bills for us when we were new in New York City. Rents were extremely high and my pay wasn't that good, and I was under a lot of stress to pay the bills, and he was becoming ill and we couldn't get answers. And he hid it for me for a period of years while I got into the entertainment business and was working in the management of celebrities, which was a very hectic career to have at the time. He was sometimes sleeping from the night before when I went to bed, got up and went to work, came home. He was still sleeping. So we knew that something was really wrong with him. He didn't look good anymore. He looked like he was not well. He was losing his memory. He was having violent spells. Some of it I will attribute to a family trait for bipolar disorder, which was hardly understood at the time, but some of it was well beyond that, and his health was really falling apart. So at one point, I was insisting that he really get me involved in some medical care, and he says I can't because I'm part of a group now that is a vigilante organization, and we can't have me being examined because I'm not human. Remember, Lise? Because he was said to be a member of the planet Aros, A-R-O-S, and said to be an erosion, which was another planet that had lost, well, it had become pretty much extinct through a disease that had wiped out the planet. He and his family had escaped, but the ship, as they escaped, was destroyed because they were not wanted anywhere else because they could have carried the disease. So he ended up having to live on an Earth with similar atmosphere, and he was vehemently against getting medical treatment, and he had cut himself off from the Guardians who could repair almost any kind of medical problem because I wanted us to be just Rob and Lisa. So he had cut himself off and then was falling apart. He got involved with the vigilante organization during the scourge of crack, which was in the early 1980s. We are at this point in our 20s, early to mid 20s. And I began to be getting threats from this organization saying, letting me know that they know who I was. I became aware that the phone was tapped. I knew that he was involved in some clandestine activities, and I wanted him to quit, but he said that he couldn't quit. He was very invested in fighting crack and working with these people. So here we had another situation where he was working on some sort of a mission, although this time it was crack, and me being...
What do you mean by crack?
The drug, rock cocaine.
So
So at the time in New York City, AIDS had become a problem and crack was a very serious problem, and people were dying from smoking it. People were killing each other to get it. There were a lot of activity between the police force and the cartels and the major drug dealers. Police would take kickbacks to protect crack dealers. They would also rob drug dealers and then sell the drugs themselves because the police were not very well appreciated or probably not very well paid at the time. And so there was a lot going on that was illegal, that was vigilante oriented.
What was Rob participation in this organization?
He, I don't know exactly what his role was. Sometimes he would say he just knows things. He was highly telepathic. He described my young sister's death exactly 2 days before it happened. Only we didn't know it was going to.
You mentioned it in the book, as a matter of fact. So wait, so what's the name of this organization again?
What was the name of it?
Yeah.
He called it democracy. And there was the idea that there was a group of cops who were taking matters into their own hand because there were frustrated with trying to enforce the law with all the rules that pertained, and they were doing things above the law or working around the law to do what their goals were. I don't know for a fact that what they were doing was good. It sounded like they thought they were doing good, but I'm pretty sure it was a mixed bag as far as their methodologies, and because it was a very the way it was, my experience of it was a very dangerous group.
So at this point, hold on, Lisa, let me interrupt you just to clarify something. At this point, the mission of the Cold War is over. Rob is still in Earth. He's married to you, and that mission in some way is done. And you guys are kind of living a normal life. You got married. You went to New York, and he cuts himself off from the connection to the Guardians and from his mission in some way.
He did that at my request, and then gets involved in what he calls fighting crime.
With democracy.
With what he says is a group of cops who are getting around the law and taking the law into their own hands. And at this point in time, his behavior is sometimes very abusive towards me, which I correlate with his illness, because it was a neurological illness. He was having memory loss. He would sometimes be very sullen and almost catatonic. And then he was developing seizures. And I was insisting that he get involved in some medical care. And he says, I can't go to a doctor. They're going to notice I'm not a human. That's a problem. But he says, I'm getting some medical care through democracy, because they've got people from all kinds of professions. And it becomes now, I wanted to get out of democracy because that seems like a very dangerous thing to be involved in. And he says, well, it's too late. I'm in it. And if you quit me, you're going to have a really big problem. And so there are some instances where I'm approached on the street and intimidated by some people who look very threatening to me. And they have no reason to single me out on the street corner. I became aware that my phone was tapped because I had confided in a friend on the telephone and saying I've got this kind of problem at home. And he offered me some help through the FBI. And a few days later, Rob came home and was holding a tape recording and quoting me in my phone call when I was home alone. So I know that they had access to my communications, and I was never able to use the phone anymore to confide in anyone. So I was very frightened of this organization that he was involved in, but and it made me start to want to get a divorce and just get away from that. Now, because he was sometimes violent, I was sometimes in a situation of being very abused. And there was one situation which drove me forever out of his home. And I ran away, and he begged me at my job to come back, because if I didn't, democracy was going to get rid of him and me. So I was basically having my life threatened because he had gotten involved in this organization that I knew too much about, and then saying, they're going to get me, and if they get me, they're going to get you, so come home. And I refused to go home because he had nearly killed me in the house. And I said, like, what's the difference? I go home, it's going to be you or them. I was just fraught. It was really too much for me to handle when I was working with some of the most busiest entertainers on the planet at the time. Yeah, I need to breathe.
Can you share the name?
I don't, and I won't. And perhaps between you and I in private, but it's not publicly. No.
I respect that.
I have a lot of respect for them, and they don't need to be mentioned, because the story is not at all about them. And they're very, very famous to this day. They've been around for a very long time, and the world is very, very familiar with their music. But in the end, I was contacted. I was hiding from Rob because I ran away from home and said, I'm never coming back. You nearly killed me with a hunting knife. At this time, I had begun to become very spiritually interested, and I was in a school of mysteries, and I was studying healing already and learning to see the aura, learning to see the human energies. And he got very upset about that and took a hunting knife to everything I owned and chopped the bed up that I was laying in. And I thought I was going to die that day. So I ran away and said, I'm not coming back. And he begged me to come home and said, if you don't come home, we're going to have a problem with democracy. And that not only me, that's going to be you too. I refused to go home, and he stopped calling. Then one night, someone had loaned me a condo to hide in while I figured out where I was going to live and get a new place to live and start a new life. There was a very shimmering, brilliant, cloudy, watery light that appeared over me in the condo and told me everything was going to be okay. And I think it was a divine being. It may have been the way the guardians were described to me at one point, and there may have been an intersection between exactly what that was. But I had an interaction with a light being, is what I'll call it. I named it Shimmery Blob because that's what it looked like. But the next day at the office, I got a call from the guardians in Rob's voice, which the guardians always spoke in Rob's voice, and I was not receptive at all to that and said, Rob, quit it. I'm not coming home. And they said, no, he's dead. They got him, and now they're going to get you. And I was very shocked and horrified to hear that, because that was my husband, as problematic as our relationship had become. But they said, we need to talk to you in person. We took his body out of the river. We have repaired it, and we're going to reinfuse his spirit back into him. And he's going to be a baby again, because we have the technology to regenerate persons. And we need your answer. And I'm like, this is too much.
Oh, no, it's too much just now. So let's breathe.
It's a lot. It's not.
I can feel, Lisa, your feelings when you're going through this history.
I'm going to drink a little water right now.
I can feel it. So I just, I can feel it. And
it was very shocking, because you can't make this stuff up. It was my husband of over 10 years. And to be told that he was dead and that they were going to put him back together and reinfuse him as an infant was very shocking to me.
No, in the river part, that they throw him in the river and they collected his body from the river. And that means that he went through all of that. That means
he went through a very traumatic ending himself. And yes. I saw evidence that that is the way it happened in my apartment when I did go back to it. And I was very upset in that moment, having gotten that phone call. And as soon as I get off the phone, where they say, we're going to contact you in 1 day. You have 1 day to decide if you're going to meet with us. But if you don't meet with us, we can't help you.
Because okay, with that, I guess you said yes.
And the reason I was very startled was the way they contacted me on the telephone was not through a normal telephone line. They used a telephone line that was strictly between my boss's desk and my desk, meaning that line did not go to the outside world nor to the switchboard. A normal person could not have gotten through the switchboard and gotten to that line. That line was only between me and my boss. And they used that line to talk to me. So I knew there was something very highly technological going on. It did not go through reception. It went straight to my telephone.
Wow.
So that was a wow. So I knew something big was going on. At that moment, the person who is now a very renowned paranormal researcher, Christopher O'Brien, who has a career in television authorship. He's written 5 books and was a host on Ancient Aliens for some of the earlier television seasons, and had a radio show called Paracast. He was not a paranormal researcher yet. He was a friend from my first job in New York. He called me up and said, "Wow, Lisa, something made me call you. I just felt so instantly compelled to call you." And I said, "Chris, something very shocking happened and I don't know what to do." And he said, "Well, come see me. We'll do a reading and we'll figure this out." And what he showed me in the
Who was this person again?
Christopher O'Brien.
Oh, yes, O'Brien. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. He has been very helpful to me in sorting out what the hell was going on. Coming out of the closet, which I didn't do until 2008 and 2007 when I found him again after some years of being, our lives went in different directions and we lost track of each other until the guide showed me where he was on TV. I saw him on TV and went, "What? That's my friend. He could help me." So
wait, they called you? They
called me on a line that does not go to the outside world. It was an inner office line. That shocked me. Told me my husband was dead, that his vigilante group had killed him because I left, and he had somehow gotten them angry. And the Guardian said, "They're after you. We have collected his body out of the river. We have repaired the body, and we are going to put his spirit back in, but he's going to be a baby."
So his spirit is going to be like a baby, but his body is going to be like an adult.
It's going to be
that's what they meant by that.
It's going to be the repaired body.
Okay.
And it's the baby spirit. Now I was very shocked and very upset. And Christopher O'Brien at the time was my first friend in New York. And this was years before he was a paranormal researcher and as renowned as he is now. He called me. Something compelled him to call me, which was another clue that something kind of big was going on, either spiritually or by telepathic suggestion. And he helped me sort out, at least in my own mind, that it was the Guardians, not Rob tricking me with his voice, saying he was the Guardians. It was the Guardians using Rob, using the internal telephone line to reach me. And I made the decision to go ahead and meet with the Guardians. And the day that I met them, I was staying at a condo that someone had let me. It was an empty condo because it was up for sale. There was a sofa bed, a bar of soap, and a robe was what I had to work with, not even a lamp. And I was going back to that condo that day, and the elevator had a very scary disturbance with it, which I thought the elevator was going to fall down the shaft, but I did manage to get out of the elevator when it stopped halfway between floors. The doors were flapping, open, shut, open, shut, open, shut, and I really wanted to get off that elevator because I thought it was going to fall down the shaft.
Whoa.
That was scary, and I didn't know what was causing that because I had been on that elevator several times coming and going that week while the condo had been lent to me. It was a luxury high-rise building. But I got off the elevator, got in the condo, locked all the doors and bolts. And soon after, there's a knock at the door, and it's Rob's body. But it's the Guardians in Rob's body, because that was the third form of technology. They could take control of a body and go into the body and operate that way.
And it's possessing something like it. Possessing the body?
It was like a channeling. If you see channels who have a spirit being that will move the arms. Yes. So I would say it was like that. It was very much like channeling. They would say lift him and put him in an unconscious box and then take control of the body. But it was very much like a channeling. So they were at the door and they said, "We're going to prove to you that Rob is dead. because I needed proof, because there was no way I was going back to Rob, because he had nearly killed me with his, there was violent behavior that occurred with his neurological disorder, because he had been having seizures, and he was not the way he had been when we were young and growing up. He was falling apart. He was having memory loss. He was having violence, and he was having seizures. And the seizures were very severe. So I decided to let him in. And he said, we're going to show you. He got shot in the head. Democracy threw him in the river. And we're going to show you the hole. And they took my finger and put it on the side of his head, and my finger went into a hole in the bone. The skin was normal, but there was a hole in his skull. There was a hole about the size of my fingertip or the end of a pencil. And it was very distinct. And they said, this is where the bullet went in. And then they took my hand and put it to the other side of his head. And this whole side was really squish. It was absolutely squishy. You could not feel bone. It was just all mush. And they said, that's where the bullet left. We repaired it. The skin is easy to repair, but the bone is not easy to repair. It has to grow back. We're going to go back to your apartment. We're going to put him in the body, and then he's going to be a baby, and we want you to raise him. Do you agree to that? And I was so scared at that point of democracy and wanting the protection that they could give me that I ended up doing it, even though I don't know that I really agreed to it. I was kind of like in shock. I didn't know what to do, but they went on as if, this is how you're going to raise him. So we went back to the apartment. The apartment was so clean. It was as if the mess of the wreck of chopping up my bed, breaking all the dishes, food splattered on the wall. It was pristine. It was empty. It was as if a huge cleaning crew had come in and cleaned it up as if to get ready for rent. Move-in ready. And I was shocked because when he was sometimes violent, he would throw things in the walls. There was one spot where there was spaghetti.
That was you guys' apartment. That's you.
It was our apartment. We went back to our old apartment, and it was so clean, and there were certain things missing, and I was very upset by that because there were signs of a big cleanup. And I said, why is this spot on the wall so clean? And they said, well, that's where they shot him. The blood went all over there, so it was cleaned up.
Wait, Lisa, I'm sorry, but didn't you scream? Or at this point, you were so accustomed to weird things that, sorry for the noise, I have people working around the house. Let me put it just...
It was shocking to me, and I didn't know how to react, and there was all kinds of stuff going on the inside because I was like, my husband's dead. My husband nearly killed me. I'm terrified of democracy. What the hell? The Guardians are back. What? It was very traumatic because it was more than a mind could take.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean,
it was,
all these women, how did you handle this? I mean, what?
It was shock. It was utter shock. It was a very long time before I began. I had to pretend. It was years before I really started to settle down because having, and even to be in the room during the regeneration event was a very powerful, energetic experience, not within me, but in the room, the energy used to transfer the spirit back into the body. When they did that, they told me to sit down and cover my head and cover my eyes because if I saw the light, it would blind me. And so I'm huddled up almost in nuclear bomb position. And the energy that was used to infuse him back into his body was so potent that I nearly passed out. I was dizzy. I was trying to stay upright. It was almost more than I could stand. I nearly passed out.
I'm nearly passing out as we speak myself.
And all of a sudden, I'm in a room. It's really quiet now. I had heard like energy rushing up and down my body in a way that was like tidal waves, like the way a human being could not stand a tidal wave. And suddenly it was quiet. And then I hear hopping. And I hear like this little boy talking to me in a man's voice. And it was a completely different person there in that man's body. It was like a little boy, like a 3 or 4 year old.
Why was a boy? My understanding is that he was a warrior from very old age for years in other planets and things like that, missions and things. Why ended up being that he had to be a baby back in Earth? Why? I mean, you did it to save your life.
I did it to save my skin.
Very simple, and it seems like you did.
I'm here.
Yes. I don't want to ask what happened to the others, but just leave it like
that. Why does a regenerated being have to start a new life? I imagine that it may be something like reincarnation. We just don't get to hop from planet to planet. We have to be born again. Not that he was exactly born. He was very young and silly, and he did not know what things were. In the beginning, he didn't know what a telephone was, and it terrified him in a way that made me feel sorry for him because it scared him so bad. He went in a corner and went into fetal position. He didn't know what much of anything was. He could speak, and he knew who I was, and he knew where he came from, but he always said, I'm not Rob, I'm Tomar. I'm new. I'm not Rob. He hurt you. I will never hurt you. Now, the thing was, Rob was ill. He had seizures. He was deaf in one ear because in defending myself during getting roughed up during a domestic violence, I hit him, defending myself, and it caused him to lose his hearing. He was sometimes violent. There were all kinds of issues there for him. And when Tomar showed up, none of those things ever happened again. There were no seizures. There was no violence. There was no depression. There was no deafness in one ear. All of that was resolved in that moment. He was fixed.
Lisa, do you have pictures with Rob?
That's Rob. Robert Hastings, the author of this book, UFOs and Nukes by Robert Hastings. I met him in 1981 at my university because I was in the music department as an electronic composition major, and Robert Hastings wandered into the music building looking for someone who could help him make some sound effects, and he knocked on my professor's door, and my professor said, call her, she'll help you. And so I met someone again. Not only did I meet Christopher O'Brien before, he was a paranormal researcher and the author of 5 books and one of the most sought after interviewees in media right now, but Robert Hastings, who wrote one of the most important books on the connection between UFOs and the military connection, which confirmed what the Guardians were telling me all along. but wasn't available to be known until he got members of the military to come forward. So somehow life set me up with two people who became extremely helpful to me in getting this story out. I was really afraid to do it because of how much was held in me in terms of trauma, in terms of shock, in terms of fear, in terms of how much I had isolated myself. So there was, when the guides suggested that I do this book, I didn't want to, and I resisted. I had written it all down in 1994. And I was beginning to see writings from people that were confirming what I had written, but I was still afraid because I had had so much fear impressed into me by the guardians saying, if you talk, you'll be taken away. The government will not let you be out there talking.
Did the guardians ever tell you, I mean, were they angry at you because you cut them off from being with them?
No.
They kind of understood it. I mean, it was only fair.
I'm sure they have ways to do things that didn't depend on me or Rob. I think they used Rob as a vehicle. I'm sure they have a lot of resources, and they could. It was very interesting to me that you hear about people who are involved in breeding programs, and some say against their will. But I was asked, would you have a child? Half erosion. And I said, no, this has been too hard.
Wait. So here we have the new Rob.
We have the new
was
Rob.
His name. He would
Tomar.
call himself Tomar. He would say, no, I'm Tomar, and he hurt you. I will never do that. And in fact, that happened. He never hurt you again?
Never. He was completely repaired, and he was infantile, but he grew up at a very rapid pace. The agreement with the guardians was raise him for 20 months. How 20 months? I don't know. Why? I don't know. But they said, well, we could give him to someone else. But we thought we'd ask you. If you want to do it, we'll protect you from democracy, and we'll get them put away for you. And the way they did that was they took papers that Rob had hidden in the apartment, and they took it, according to them, and used it to get people taken out of the situation, convicted for.
So they took it to the police, basically, like
they promised me protection. I would say that Tomar was probably involved in some of that protection, and then there were some. Tomar got involved in a mission his own self, and I was very unhappy about that. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I'd like to raise a question. It's possible that some of what is going on, and this is why I use the word interdimensional, there was a mission that talked about needing to correct things in the current time, because if not corrected in the current time, they would end up heading to a point in time where Russia and China would band together and go against the US, and that would change the course of Earth history in a not good way.
You do know that you're not the only one talking about that.
Now we're talking about a time travel mission where they needed to correct something so that our future did not go in a certain direction. This is why I believe we should not be trying to shoot down everything we see. Because It may be people from the future coming back to see what went wrong. And Tom Kenyon writes that in the Arcturian Anthology. By the way, it's Kenyon. Yeah. That's a really interesting book because the beings give him some remarkable points of view that you may find really interesting. But the idea was they had brought Tomar back, needed him to be raised up so that he could do a mission which would have to do with correcting things in the now, so that in time there wouldn't be this alliance between China and Russia to go against the US and end up with a very disastrous effect. Nuclear speaking.
To my understanding, yes, this is not the only time that I have heard that people from the future is traveling back here trying to support us so this would not happen. Do we know if this has already been resolved?
A outcome of what he did. At that point, I said, I'm going to go my own way now. I told Tomar, we're not going to share the same space anymore.
He was already a grown-up. It was over the 20 months already.
It was a little early. I kind of used the end of the lease that we had at that time to say, all right, I'm moving somewhere else. You can have this apartment or get your own. That I used the termination of the lease to say, all right, I'm going to go live somewhere else. I'm tired. I'm 28 years old. I'm tired. This is too hard. No, I don't want to have a child of half human origin.
And galactic origin.
And erosion was the apparent planetary origin of that, I guess, genetic lineage. I was worn out, and my spirituality had really begun to grow because I had met someone by chance, or I would say divine providence, and there were other things that happened by divine providence that let me know that there was another path for me. And I knew that I was going to become a healer. I knew I had begun to see the human energy field. I was developing intuition a little bit, not a lot, but I had this big hunger for it, and I had decided this is where my life needed to go. After that, I did study and get certified with Healing Touch program and have been a healer for over 11 years. But at this point in time, I also was having some mystical sorts of experiences happening, letting me know it's not just ETs, but there's
other things.
There are water beings. There are beings that are invisible to us, but that can communicate with us. There are divine beings. There are angels. There are guardians. I like guardian angels, not just guardians that protect the earth, that are considered maybe more like an ET. But I was becoming more aware of many other types of beings. And so my spirituality really needed to get a big expansion. So I went in that direction, and it's led me to a life as meeting you, for example.
And having this lovely...
So I ended it as best I could. I was really, really exhausted and fried and shell-shocked and fried. And I began a new relationship after a couple of years. And he said, you got to write all this down. It'd make a good book. And I'm like, I wrote it all down, and it sounded like a shell-shocked. It was not.
You do not know everybody's going to probably read this book and everything around. But Lisa...
Well, this book has the benefit of hindsight now and a lot of time to rest and think about it and to become much more spiritual and think about where do these beings fit in our realm. So I've taken many decades of rest, and the guides asked me to do it, and I said, all right. And at one point they said, please make sure you write about the concerns of the guardians, the advanced beings. And please talk about where things are going with humanity.
Where are we going, Lisa?
We're going. It's happening. It's happening now. And even though there's going to be a lot of blowback against the people who have come forward in the congressional hearings, people will register truth and they'll register BS, and they will know for their own selves, and other people will go, oh, that's just a crock. And there'll be many people disputing it. It's already happening, but we connect and we know soul to soul. We know what love, light, and truth are.
Some of the most important things that you just said is let's I'm sorry, I have two dogs and they love to be with me, but no now.
It's too long.
Is hear yourself, like listen to what your heart is telling you, and know what the news are telling you only, or what the others are telling you. I guess today is more about if I feel it's right for me or within me, and it's what it takes me to be with you today and listen to your story and give you all the credit and all the support, because I just still not believe how strong you are.
Me neither.
And also, my words in my mind is, how in the world Lisa made that agreement? If we're going to believe in reincarnation, how did you write that agreement? Because let's remember, we do have an agreement before we come here, and it seems like you did agree to all of this stuff. Not anymore. He said, oh no, I didn't know what I was signing into.
I guess I got myself into it.
Yeah.
Well, I think reading Eric von Daniken's book, Chariots of the Gods, that opened a door for me. I really wanted to know. Well,
oh, you really wanted to know.
I really wanted to know. And there were many people seeking contact. And let's remember, spiritual protection from the archangels. You need that if you're going to be reaching out, because not all of the beings out there are protector beings. Some of them do want to do stuff.
You mentioned something while you were talking in this interview about the grace. My understanding, what I've heard, which I don't know much about it, I just know names of Pleiadians, which I don't know how to say it in English well, Pleiadianos in Spanish, Pleiadians. Arcturians, you just mentioned them.
Arcturians.
Yes, which is also like a race from planets outside. And Syrians, which I believe, according to my understanding, that is I received in a meditation that that's kind of my origin in some way. So grace, I haven't heard the best things from them. Do you know anything about it? I mean, like, can you expand a little bit on what you know about grace? So,
well, the one mention that I was able to make was describing them as little guys with stick-like arms. Not let me see them, almost as if they had some ability to be invisible, but I somehow saw through that. And I cannot explain it to it other than they were kind of cowering behind the tall one. And according to Robert Hastings, he's heard many reports of different types of beings working together, tall ones, grays, reptilian. And some people say there are some that are just, you don't want to ever encounter one of those. And other people will say they're so filled with love. And I don't know if it's a case-by-case basis or if there are different intents or different planetary, and we group them up into too large a bucket. I don't know. I would say there's quite a bit of people discourse about different kinds of beings where I can't speak on it very much. My experience in my life is pretty unusual. I have encountered people who have written things or experienced things this very similar to aspects of what I've written, but I think Rob was a variable. Being as smart as he was, I think he was somewhat troubled, and I think he had a family trait of bipolar, which was not helpful in the situation. Having an exceptionally high IQ, which his father verified to me, and I knew him until just shortly before his death, so I knew him for over
But
50
Rob was
years.
adopted by the human parents, or how was this?
I think I was told that as part of the introduction. Now, we could get into another conversation about the formation of his family. Were they his real family? Were they a backup family? I have had an intuitive tell me that they were part human, part other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very close with my brother-in-law Michael, and I'm Sister Lisa, and he's Brother Michael to me. We're very close at this time because I did not know that anyone had ever seen Rob switching out with the holograms or the other beings, and Michael
So
saw it.
his brother did it.
The brothers saw it, and we didn't start talking until, out of 5 boys, the third one had passed away. Rob passed away in 1997. He completely fell apart and deteriorated and died at a young age. He had been diagnosed with AIDS, but given how much contact he had, I wonder if it was a misdiagnosis, especially with the amount of research that's being put in around illness caused by UFO exposure. That's conjecture on my part, but the Guardians were talking about ill effects of radiation exposure with UFO activity going back to the 70s. And now it is being studied by the government in a collaboration with Stanford University.
Well,
So
as a matter of fact, in the congressional hearing that they were, one of the invitees, I don't remember his name right now. Can you hear me?
it glitched for a moment, but I'm catching up.
Yeah, hopefully we're not being, well, probably will be seen. Um, um, so he mentioned that he saw some disturbing people being hurt, which I didn't like because then he kind of
No.
opened the door to make people believe that they hurting people. Like you said, there is all type of stuff over there, but at the same time, I believe he was talking about this. What you mentioned, the exposure to this type of energy that you mentioned, it was the Havana syndrome. You did not mention it in this interview, but you mentioned it outside of this interview. So when people get exposed, so let me just go back a minute before we wrap up in this interview. So you left him. You basically decide, I'm not dealing with this anymore. In your book, I saw that he reacted like, no, don't go when you're supposed to have a child, he said.
Well, it was offered around the time I was like we're pretty far along in the 20 months. I was making plans that I wasn't sharing with him. And who asked me to have the child and who I said no to was number 10 on behalf of the Guardians. And no, Tomar was not happy that I had decided to go my own way, but he accepted it. And that's when he started the China mission, as I describe it in the section of the book, where he was doing a time travel mission that had to do with correcting something that would end up being a major problem for Earth.
Going in the future or going in the back? Going in the past or to the future? Don't know that.
It's kind of one and the same.
Time doesn't exist to begin with.
Yeah, we can boggle on that. The idea was they were talking about they had discovered a munitions stockpile in China, and there was a group of people that wanted to overthrow the government. And they wanted to get rid of the munitions stockpile because if that change occurred, then things would go in a direction where in the future there would be an alliance between China and Russia, and they would go against the US, and it would be a doomsday situation. So it was sounding kind of preposterous. I did research, and there actually have been a number of munitions piles have exploded. There have been some very large explosions where groups were storing up stuff to do things and have exploded. And so it's not that it's never happened. I think when people want a munition stockpile, they're up to something. They're trying to cause something to happen. They're not trying to defend their home or their store, their family business. They're up to something. And the way he described they were going to pull off, I thought was completely preposterous. They were going to take a plane and fly it into the munition stockpile. And I thought, who does that? Well, guess what? 9/11 did that. Stole a plane and flew it into a target. It does happen. And it does change world history.
They did it.
According to him, they did it. So at that point, I was worn out. I really couldn't take any more surprises. I needed a rest. And I took a rest. I went into denial as well. I decided for a while that since Rob had been ill, I decided to explain a lot of it as, I had a husband who had schizophrenia. And when I became a pharmaceutical industry transcriber, meaning I listened to the advisory boards for the people developing medications. So I was listening to a lot of extremely intelligent scientists, that I became educated that schizophrenia was not what was going on. And then I was back to, okay, what was really going on? It wasn't multiple personality disorder. I looked into multiple personality disorder. It did not fit the basic description. There were a couple of points, but out of 28, there wasn't a lot of overlap. And I was like, all right, I'm back to square one. Stuff happened. And that's around the time when I believe the guide started saying, it's time to get the book out, because I had written a rough draft of it, and it was written by a very shell-shocked person. I call it the throw-up version. And
the throw-up version.
Throw-up version. Wow, this happened.
I guess it was very therapeutic for you. I mean,
at the time, I had so much healing to do that I don't think it was helpful to me, other than I had a guarantee that I wasn't going to forget it all, or if I did, I could refer to the first version. And it became the basis of a project with Christopher O'Brien and myself, and we're planning to revive it because he had been very busy writing his book. So I said, well, then I'll just write my book. And the guides were asking me to get the book out, and I didn't want to, but when they introduced him to me, he was the first person I told in 2008, and he was like, he told me it was the most amazing, bizarre thing he had ever come across during his 25 years as an investigator, but some of it sounded too much for him to take in, and he thought some of it sounded hokey, and there may have been stuff that just sounded ludicrous, because you can't just take it all in and go, oh, I buy that. Your mind has to give you pushback. It needs reality to be reality.
Lisa, sorry to interrupt you. I see in this book, it's not in Spanish yet. Hopefully you will translate it to something other languages. It's a pretty thick one. I mean, it's not just a baby one but it's pretty entertained. I've been reading it, and I recommend it. Honestly, I think
Thank
it's
you.
a very good way for us to open our minds for something that may probably be very real for everybody, even the government of the United States, who has always said no or has hidden or has denied existence of UFOs or UAPs, is
Mhm.
probably now thinking twice to accept it to the world. Lisa Nelson. Lisa, who's Lisa Nelson today?
Lisa Nelson is a girl from the Midwest who's had a very interesting life. I am a healer now. I have a daughter, two amazing daughters, and incredible heart connections with a very beautiful community of healers. I do practice, and some of the people are experiencers who have been doubting themselves, got their sanity. They don't want to communicate with people because they think they will be unbelieved or thought crazy. I really have a lot of heart for people who have had things that are very difficult to understand because we're only human, and there are things that have been created that are just beyond our comprehension while we're in this form. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, it'll be a situation where we do consider the positive things about the beings and not just take a view that they're a problem to national security, because that would be a very regrettable mistake, I think. You have to take the intention into consideration, and hopefully we will evolve and be kinder and more loving to one another, and hopefully we all grow and evolve together.
I believe that this is what is expected from us as a race, for us to
Mm,
evolve and be part of the universe as a not only as a planet of experiments or where people come and go, but as a planet of participating in the evolution of the universe.
mm.
Lisa, it was just a more than a honor to have you in our show. Let me tell you that you are the first person that we are interviewing in English. First
Mm,
of
thank
many.
you.
First of many. Thank you for allowing us to have this 2 hours conversation, a little
Thank you
more than
so
that.
much. I'm
Um,
I'm honored that you're my first interview after releasing this book. It's such a comfort to me that it was you. Because people can be awfully controversial, and it's not that I need people to believe everything, but I was so welcome to say what I needed to say. And
Absolutely.
I thank you so much for your open
Absolutely.
heart, your
The
expansive
important is that you
spirit.
felt safe, and I wanted to feel safe.
Thank you so much. I am grateful to you.
Well, Lisa Nelson, she's been with us for the first time. I guess, Lisa, after this and what is happening in the Congress of the United States, you probably will be interviewed in everywhere, everywhere. So I'm just happy that I was the first one,
You are the first.
and we will be probably seen by a lot of people eventually. And knowing that this is happening, it probably did happen for a long time. I tell you, I have a cousin. I'm not going to say her name because I have a few cousins. So but she's telling me that she's been experiencing this, having these experiences since she was 10. She was lifted on a ship. According to her, she saw beds and bodies, people, and checked on their bodies, like these beings checking on their bodies. We don't know
Exam.
what type of visit was this. Examine them, checking, yeah. And she's been having this experience since forever. According to her, she sees them, she sees the ships, and it's been, and funny enough, when she goes to sleep, she always leaves her body,
Uh,
but she never walks out of her room. She's really afraid of doing that. And it's
oh,
been always all her life in her own room. She sees it, but she cannot really do much about it. I guess she will benefit from good guidance and feel more comfortable with somebody that kind of is familiar. When she has any kind of experience, she calls me and she tells me, "You
oh,
are the only person I can talk to."
She's blessed to have you.
Yes.
Yes. So. I don't doubt her at all.
Yeah.
It must be awfully hard to have that happen.
Yes. So anyway, it was a pleasure. I'm going to switch to Spanish now, Lisa, okay? Just hang on with me. Bien, ha sido un súper placer tener a Lisa Nelson. Lisa es una healer, una sanadora energética que tuvo su vida común y corriente en el mundo de la industria, del entretenimiento por mucho tiempo. Fue contactada, tuvo una relación de muchos años y hasta se casó con una persona en donde ella, pues, descubre que es una persona en una misión dentro del cuerpo de esta persona en el cuerpo. Lisa, let me ask you, so Tamar will be then a walk-in at this point? What we call a walk-in? Like he walks in?
Tamar?
No. Tamar,
you could, some people would like that term. He's not on the planet since 1997.
He died.
He died. Like,
you mentioned it wasn't easy.
He's gone. Two of the brothers are gone. One has withdrawn from the family, and the last brother, the fifth brother, is very close with me, and he's the one who saw Rob switching with the holograms.
Okay. So, Lisa, thank you very much again. Let me allow you to leave today. And for your time. No, thank you for allowing this energetic connection between you and me.
I look forward to seeing you again.
All right, guys, I think it's time for us to go. It's time for us having a unique interview. I hope we have more than this in the future. Lisa Nelson was in contact with what we all today call UAPs, or known in the past as UFOs. And she is now ready to share her book, her story, and her life story that finally she's having today as a normal one. And les agradezco muchísimo por estar con nosotros en esta entrevista única con Lisa. Por favor, recuerden, pueden cambiar los settings en la pantalla. Van a YouTube, bajan y cambian de inglés de español a inglés y les salen todos los subtítulos. Más adelante vamos a ver si podemos hacer una postproducción y también traducirlo al español a través de un doblaje, pero por ahora lo pueden hacer con los subtítulos. Un abrazo grande. Esta es Marcela Gómez Bogomolny. En adelante estaremos haciendo entrevistas también de este tipo y también estaremos dando clases nosotros mismos. Muy pronto estaré dando una clase que tiene que ver cómo encender, qué significa encender la llamatrina en tu vida real y cómo hacerlo a través del árbol de la vida. Así que espera la clase porque también va a pasar. Un abrazo grande. This is Marcela Gómez Bogomolny. Marcela Gómez Bogomolny, la directora de Simpson 33, junto a mi esposo que hoy no está porque está ocupado. Así que nada, un abrazo grande y que estén muy bien.